You thought kidnapping some random Roman would be easy money? You were very, very wrong. You're having a perfectly normal Tuesday morning in 75 BC, which for a pirate means you've already robbed 3 merchant ships and are eyeing a 4th. The Aegean Sea sparkles around your vessel like nature's own jewelry store, and you're feeling pretty good about your life choices. Sure, your mother wanted you to be a fisherman, but where's the excitement in hauling nets when you could be hauling treasure? That's when you spot it. A sleek Roman vessel cutting through the waves with all the confidence of someone who's never been properly robbed. Your captain, a weathered man who goes by Bloodbeard, despite having a perfectly normal brown beard, points his gnarled finger at the ship. "There's our payday, lads," he growls, and you all nod in agreement, because honestly, what could go wrong? You and your crew of 20-something pirates, mostly farm boys who got tired of farming, row your ship alongside the Roman vessel with practiced ease. You've done this dance before: board the ship, tie up the passengers, demand ransom, wait for payment, release hostages, sail away rich. It's basically maritime customer service, with more rope and fewer refunds. The Roman ship surrenders without much fuss, which should have been your first warning. Rich Romans usually put up at least some token resistance, if only to maintain their dignity, but these passengers practically line up for you, hands already raised like they're volunteering for something pleasant. Among them stands a young man, maybe 25, with the kind of perfectly styled hair that screams, "I have servants for my servants." "Gentlemen," he says in crisp Latin, because of course he speaks Latin like he invented it personally. "I assume this is a robbery? How refreshing. I was beginning to think this voyage would be boring." You exchange glances with your fellow pirates. This isn't the usual terrified weeping you're accustomed to. Most hostages at least have the courtesy to look afraid. This man examines your weapons like he's shopping for dinner cutlery. He even nods approvingly at your captain's sword, muttering something about adequate craftsmanship for provincial work. "What's your name, Roman?" Bloodbeard demands, because knowing names makes the ransom negotiations more personal. "Gaius Julius Caesar," the young man replies, adjusting his toga like he's posing for a statue. "Perhaps you've heard of me. No? Well, you will. You haven't heard of him, obviously. He looks like every other privileged Roman who thinks the world revolves around his particular patch of marble villa. But there's something in his tone, a casual confidence, that makes you wonder if maybe you should have heard of him. You make a mental note to ask around when you get back to port, assuming this goes normally. It does not go normally. Within minutes of being tied up on your ship, Caesar begins what can only be described as a performance review of your piracy operation. "The rope work is adequate," he announces to no one in particular, testing his bonds with the air of a man examining hotel accommodations. "Though I question the knot choice. A true sailor would have used a bowline here, not this, what would you call this, a disappointed sheep attempt?" Your fellow pirate Marcus, who tied those knots, looks personally offended. He's been tying knots since before he could walk properly, and he takes pride in his rope work. "That's a perfectly good sailor's knot," he protests. "Is it though?" Caesar tilts his head thoughtfully. "Because, from where I'm sitting, which granted is tied up on a pirate ship, it looks more like someone tried to gift wrap a fish and gave up halfway through." The crew erupts in nervous laughter because honestly, Marcus's knots do look a bit like disappointed fish wrapping. But laughing at your own crew member while he's being insulted by your hostage feels wrong somehow. "You're supposed to be the scary ones here." Caesar continues his critique. "And another thing, your boarding technique could use work. You approached from the starboard side with the sun behind you, which was tactically sound, but then you announced yourselves with all the subtlety of a drunken elephant. A proper pirate would have maintained the element of surprise until the last possible moment. We're proper pirates, you find yourself protesting, which immediately makes you question why you're defending your professional credentials to someone you've just kidnapped. Are you? Caesar asks, with the tone of a teacher who's caught you cheating on an exam. Because proper pirates would have researched their target. They would have known exactly who they were kidnapping and adjusted their ransom demands accordingly. This brings you to the ransom discussion, which is where everything goes completely sideways. Bloodbeard, trying to regain control of his own kidnapping, clears his throat importantly. Right then, your ransom is 20 talents of silver. Caesar stares at him. Then he starts laughing, not the nervous laughter of a frightened hostage, but the rich, amused laughter of someone who's just heard the world's best joke. 20 talents? He repeats, wiping tears from his eyes. 20 talents! My dear maritime entrepreneurs, I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Bloodbeard growls, because he's set a lot of ransoms in his day, and 20 talents is perfectly reasonable for a random Roman, even a well-dressed one. The misunderstanding, Caesar says with infinite patience, like he's explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow child, is that you seem to think I'm worth only 20 talents. I'm not insulted. Well, actually, I am insulted. But I'm also deeply concerned about your business acumen. You look around at your fellow pirates. Everyone seems as confused as you feel. This is definitely not how ransoms usually go. Most hostages try to negotiate the price down, not up. I demand, Caesar continues, that you raise my ransom to 50 talents, minimum. Honestly, I'd prefer 75, but I understand you're working with limited imagination. Silence falls over your ship, like a blanket made of pure bewilderment. Even the seagulls seem confused. You've heard of Stockholm Syndrome, except it hasn't been invented yet, and also it usually goes the other way around. Want us to ask for more money? Marcus asks slowly, like he's trying to solve a riddle that might explode if he gets it wrong. I insist you ask for more money, Caesar corrects. 20 talents is frankly insulting. Do you know who I am? I'm a Caesar. We're related to Venus herself. I've held public office. I've given speeches that made grown senators weep with joy. I've written poetry that would make Homer jealous if Homer weren't already dead and therefore unable to experience proper jealousy. But you're tied up, you point out, because someone needs to mention the obvious here. Yes, and remarkably well tied up considering the amateur-hour rope work, Caesar agrees cheerfully. But being temporarily restrained doesn't diminish my inherent worth as a human being and future leader of the civilized world. If anything, it should increase my ransom value. Think of the story you'll be able to tell. Remember that time we kidnapped Julius Caesar? You'll be legend, assuming you price me appropriately. Bloodbeard scratches his actual brown beard thoughtfully. You can practically see the gears turning in his head, which is concerning because Bloodbeard's gears tend to grind rather than turn smoothly. So you want us to ask your people for 50 talents instead of 20? 50 talents minimum, Caesar nods approvingly, though I'd really prefer if you mentioned that I'm worth at least 100. Let them negotiate you down to 75. It's all about the psychology of the initial offer. And that's how you find yourself in the surreal position of taking ransom advice from your own hostage. Caesar doesn't just agree to the higher ransom, he insists on helping craft the ransom note. He critiques your handwriting. Have you considered learning to read your own writing? Suggests improvements to your Latin grammar. The subjunctive mood is your friend, not your enemy, and even recommends a more professional tone. You can't just say, "Give us money or he dies," Caesar explains patiently. That's so pedestrian. Try something like, "The esteemed Julius Caesar awaits your prompt financial consideration for his safe return to Roman society." It's the same message, but with dignity. By the end of your first day with Caesar, you're starting to wonder who exactly kidnapped whom. He somehow turned your pirate ship into his personal floating classroom, and you're all reluctantly enrolled students in Caesar University, majoring in how to be better at crime, with a minor in classical literature appreciation. As the sun sets over the Aegean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that even Caesar admits are acceptable for Mediterranean standards, you find yourself in the strange position of looking forward to tomorrow's lessons. Not because you like being lectured by your hostage, obviously, but because, well, maybe, because Caesar's lectures are actually more interesting than anything that's happened to you since you left your farm. You fall asleep that night to the sound of Caesar practicing his poetry recitations for tomorrow's voluntary performance, and you can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, you've bitten off more than you can chew. Though you won't admit it to yourself for several more days, you're absolutely right. You wake up the second morning to discover that somehow, overnight, Caesar has become the most important person on your own ship. Not officially, obviously, he's still tied up. But when you emerge from your sleeping quarters, you find half your crew gathered around him like he's holding court, which in a way he is. The key to proper knot tying, Caesar is explaining to Marcus with the patience of a saint and the condescension of a philosophy professor, lies not just in technique, but in understanding the purpose. Are you securing cargo? Are you restraining a person? Are you simply showing off for your fellow maritime professionals? Each situation requires a different approach. Marcus nods eagerly, like Caesar isn't the person he's supposed to be guarding. You notice Marcus has already retied Caesar's bonds using what looks suspiciously like the knot Caesar suggested yesterday. Your hostage is somehow training his own guards to be better at holding him hostage. The irony is so thick you could spread it on bread. "Ah, you're awake," Caesar greets you cheerfully. "Excellent timing. I was just explaining to your colleagues here the finer points of maritime organization. Did you know your watch schedule is completely inefficient? You've got men standing guard when they should be sleeping, and sleeping when they should be maintaining the ship. It's no wonder your rigging looks like it was arranged by drunk monkeys." You look up at your rigging, which you've never really thought about before. Now that Caesar mentions it, it does look somewhat chaotic. But you're not about to admit that your kidnapping victim has a point about ship maintenance. "We know how to run our own ship," you say defensively. "Do you, though?" Caesar asks with that maddening tone of gentle curiosity. "Because yesterday I noticed 3 separate safety violations, a sail that's been patched so many times it's more patch than sail, and a crew that doesn't seem to know the difference between port and starboard, which, for professional sailors, is somewhat concerning." Before you can protest that you absolutely know the difference between port and starboard, port is the left one? Or is that starboard? Bloodbeard emerges from his cabin, looking like he's aged 5 years overnight. Your captain, usually the picture of confident maritime authority, now has the expression of a man who's discovered his retirement fund has been managed by particularly clever squirrels. "Caesar," Bloodbeard says, and you notice he doesn't use any of his usual threatening pirate captain voice, "we need to discuss your accommodations." "Ah, yes," Caesar nods approvingly. "I was hoping you'd bring that up. First, the rope situation we discussed. Second, I'm going to need better food. Third, and this is non-negotiable, you need to do something about the noise level during my thinking hours." "Your thinking hours?" you ask, because this seems like information you should have been told about. 3 to 5 in the afternoon, Caesar explains matter-of-factly. "That's when I compose my daily correspondence and work on my poetry. The constant chatter from your crew is deeply distracting. How do you expect me to craft proper metaphors with people discussing fish and weather every 5 minutes?" "You want us to be quiet so you can write poetry?" Bloodbeard asks slowly. "I want you to be quiet so I can write good poetry," Caesar corrects. "Bad poetry is a crime against civilization. Good poetry, on the other hand, is a gift to future generations. Surely you don't want to be responsible for depriving humanity of my artistic contributions." And somehow, this actually makes sense to your crew. By afternoon, your pirate ship has established quiet hours for Caesar's creative process. You watch in fascination as 20-odd pirates, men who usually solve problems by hitting them with various objects, voluntarily lower their voices to whispers during Caesar's designated writing time. It gets worse, or better, you're not entirely sure which. During the 3rd day, Caesar establishes what he calls educational recreational activities. This starts when he notices your crew playing dice and immediately begins critiquing their gambling techniques. "You're approaching games of chance with no understanding of probability," he lectures, while somehow managing to gesture expressively despite being tied up. "Luck is not a strategy. Mathematics is a strategy. Luck is what happens when strategy meets opportunity." "It's just dice," protests Tommy, your youngest crew member, who barely looks old enough to shave, let alone pirate. "Nothing is just anything," Caesar replies with the tone of someone who's never encountered a problem he couldn't solve through the application of pure intellect. "Those dice represent probability mathematics in physical form. Each roll is an independent event with calculable odds. The fact that you don't understand this explains why you're all broke, despite being professional thieves. This hits uncomfortably close to home, since your crew is indeed perpetually broke, despite stealing things for a living. You'd always assumed this was just the natural state of pirates, like how sailors are naturally wet and merchants are naturally boring. Fine, says Tommy, with the defiance of youth. If you're so smart about dice, why don't you show us? This is a mistake. A huge mistake. You know it's a mistake the moment Tommy says it, but by then it's too late. Caesar's eyes light up with the particular gleam of someone who's just been challenged to do exactly what he was hoping someone would challenge him to do. I thought you'd never ask, Caesar says with obvious delight, though I'll need someone to actually roll the dice for me, what with the rope situation. What follows can only be described as a masterclass in applied mathematics disguised as gambling. Caesar, despite being physically unable to touch the dice, somehow manages to win every single game. Not through luck. He carefully explains his reasoning for each bet, discussing probability calculations and risk assessment like he's teaching a university course on advanced dice theory. The key, he explains after winning his 7th consecutive game, is understanding that you're not gambling against the dice, you're gambling against other people's understanding of the dice. Most people bet emotionally. They bet based on what they want to happen, not on what's likely to happen. This is why most people lose. Your crew, initially skeptical, becomes increasingly fascinated. These are men who've spent their lives taking things that belong to other people, but they've never approached theft as an intellectual exercise. Caesar treats everything, robbery, dice games, even basic conversation, like a problem to be solved through the application of logic and superior knowledge. Could you teach us? Marcus asks hesitantly. The dice thing, I mean, the mathematics. Of course, Caesar replies graciously. Though I should warn you, proper education requires dedication. You can't just learn one lesson and expect to master the subject. Knowledge is like physical fitness. It requires consistent exercise. And that's how your pirate ship accidentally becomes a floating university with Julius Caesar as the involuntary professor. He doesn't just teach dice mathematics, he teaches navigation. Your current course is adding at least 2 days to what should be a simple journey. Basic Latin. If you're going to threaten people in Latin, you should at least pronounce the threats correctly, and what he calls professional development for maritime entrepreneurs. The professional development lessons are particularly surreal. Caesar, still tied up, conducts actual performance reviews of your piracy techniques. Your boarding approach shows initiative, he tells young Tommy during one such session, but your follow-through lacks confidence. You brandish your sword like you're not entirely sure what it's for. Conviction, my boy. If you're going to threaten someone, commit to the threat. Half-hearted menacing is just embarrassing for everyone involved. Tommy nods seriously and practices his sword brandishing, while Caesar provides constructive feedback. You watch your fellow pirate take sword-threatening lessons from the person he's supposed to be threatening, and you wonder if perhaps your life has taken a turn toward the absurd. But the strangest part isn't that Caesar is teaching your crew. The strangest part is that your crew is getting better at being pirates. Marcus's knots are now works of art. Tommy's threats have gained genuine menace. Even Bloodbeard has started pronouncing his Latin curses correctly, which makes them significantly more intimidating. By the end of the first week, Caesar has somehow earned not just the respect of your crew, but something approaching genuine affection. Not because he's stopped being your hostage. He still makes daily jokes about having you all crucified when he gets free, but because he treats your crew like they're capable of improvement. Most people look at pirates and see criminals. Caesar looks at pirates and sees untapped potential. He doesn't approve of piracy, exactly, but he seems to respect the entrepreneurial spirit behind it. You've identified a market need, he explains during one of his impromptu business lectures, and you've developed a service to meet that need. The fact that your service is technically illegal doesn't change the underlying business principles. You think piracy is a business? Bloodbeard asks, genuinely curious. All crime is business, Caesar replies matter-of-factly. The only difference between a pirate and a merchant is that merchants have legal paperwork for their theft. You're both in the business of transferring wealth from people who have it to people who want it. You're just more honest about your methods. This is either the most cynical thing you've ever heard or the most insightful, possibly both. The ransom negotiations, meanwhile, have turned into their own form of entertainment. Caesar doesn't just approve the messages your crew sends to Rome. He writes them personally. dictating correspondence that reads less like ransom demands and more like friendly business proposals. "Esteemed colleagues," begins his latest letter, "I trust this message finds you well. As you know, I am currently enjoying the hospitality of some maritime entrepreneurs in the Aegean. While their accommodations are admittedly rustic, I find myself impressed by their dedication to their craft. They have requested 50 talents for my return, which I consider a reasonable fee for the educational experience they've provided. You've never seen ransom notes that include compliments for the kidnappers, but somehow Caesar makes it work. His letters sound so professional that you're half convinced Rome will send the money along with a thank you note for taking such good care of their citizen. As your second week with Caesar begins, you find yourself looking forward to his daily lectures, his poetry readings, which are actually quite good, though you'd never admit it, and his ongoing commentary on the deficiencies of your ship's organization. He's turned what should have been a simple kidnapping into the most educational experience of your life. You're starting to suspect that might have been his plan all along, but you still haven't figured out what he plans to do about that whole having you all crucified thing he keeps mentioning. Every time someone brings it up, Caesar just smiles and changes the subject to something like optimal sail configuration or the proper pronunciation of Greek curse words. You're beginning to think you should probably worry about that more than you do, but Caesar's lectures on maritime law are starting in 10 minutes, and you don't want to miss his explanation of jurisdictional complications in international waters. You can worry about crucifixion later. Right now, you're getting an education. You wake up on day 10 to the sound of Caesar reciting what he claims is an epic poem about the adventures of Odysseus, but which sounds suspiciously like a thinly veiled allegory about a clever man outsmarting a crew of bumbling sailors. The coincidence is almost certainly not coincidental. And lo, Caesar's voice rings across the morning waters. The hero, bound by rope but not by spirit, did speak unto his captors words of wisdom, though their ears were filled with the wax of ignorance and the cotton of poor education. You notice he's worked in at least 3 different insults to your crew's intelligence, without breaking the poetic meter once. This is actually impressive, though you're not about to tell him that. "Is that poem about us?" Marcus asks suspiciously. "All great art," Caesar replies with innocent dignity, "speaks to universal human experiences. If you happen to see yourself reflected in the tale of sailors who mistake their own ignorance for the normal state of the world, well, that says more about you than it does about my poetry." Your fellow pirates exchange glances. You're pretty sure that was another insult, but it was wrapped in so many fancy words that you can't be entirely certain. Caesar has this talent for making you feel insulted and educated at the same time, which is deeply confusing. The poetry situation has gotten out of hand. What started as Caesar amusing himself during quiet hours has evolved into daily recitals that your entire crew now attends voluntarily. Voluntarily. Your pirates attending poetry readings by your own hostage. And somehow this seems normal now. Today's performance, Caesar announces, like he's introducing entertainment at a royal court, will be a selection of original works inspired by my current circumstances. I call the collection Meditations on Temporary Inconvenience. Temporary inconvenience, Bloodbeard repeats. You're kidnapped. I prefer to think of it as an unexpected sabbatical, Caesar corrects cheerfully. A chance to step away from the usual pressures of Roman political life and focus on my artistic development. Really, you've done me a favour. When I return to Rome, I'll be able to speak with authority about the maritime experience. My speeches will be enriched by authentic nautical metaphors. You're starting to understand that Caesar doesn't just see the bright side of situations, he somehow manages to convince himself that every situation is actually going exactly according to his secret master plan. Being kidnapped isn't a problem, it's a career development opportunity. His first poem of the day is titled Ode to Rope, which manages to be simultaneously about his physical bonds and a metaphor for the connections between all human souls. It's actually quite moving, until you remember that he's essentially writing love poetry about the rope you use to tie him up. The cognitive dissonance is giving you a headache. The second poem, Ballad of the Aegean Entrepreneurs, is definitely about your crew, and it's flattering, sort of. Caesar has somehow written a ballad that makes piracy sound like a noble calling undertaken by misunderstood artists of the sea. According to his verse, you're not thieves, you're redistributors of wealth, operating outside conventional economic structures because you're too free-spirited for normal society. That's not why I became a pirate, Tommy whispers to you during a particularly dramatic stanza about brave souls who chose the honest life of the sea over the dishonest life of the land. Why did you become a pirate? You whisper back, realizing you've never actually asked. My dad's farm got eaten by locusts 3 years running, Tommy admits. Seemed easier than starving. You look around at your crew, really look at them, and realize most of them probably have similar stories. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become a pirate because they love crime. They become pirates because the alternatives are worse. Caesar seems to understand this in a way that most Romans wouldn't. His poetry doesn't mock your circumstances, it somehow makes them sound noble. This is either very insulting or very kind. You're not sure which. The poetry readings are just the beginning of what Caesar calls cultural enrichment activities. He's also instituted daily lessons in what he terms practical philosophy. Philosophy, he explains to your assembled crew, is simply the art of thinking clearly about complicated subjects. Since piracy is nothing if not a complicated subject, philosophy should be very relevant to your professional interests. His philosophical discussions cover topics like the ethics of property redistribution, wherein he argues that all property is stolen from someone, so pirates are just participating in an ongoing historical process, the nature of freedom, a complex meditation on whether anyone is truly free, including people who aren't tied up on pirate ships, and the relationship between power and responsibility. Maiato mostly seems to be Caesar's way of preparing you for the fact that he's going to kill you all later. The thing about revenge, Caesar mentions casually during one philosophy lesson, like he's discussing the weather, is that it's most satisfying when it's perfectly justified. Random violence is just violence. But calculated retribution for specific wrongs? That's justice with style. Are you still planning to have us crucified? Marcus asks nervously. Oh, absolutely, Caesar replies cheerfully. I promised I would, and I'm a man of my word. But I'm in no hurry. First, I want to see how much you can all improve with proper education. It would be a shame to execute you before you've reached your full potential as human beings. This is either the most terrifying thing you've ever heard or the most supportive, possibly both. Caesar wants to help you become better people before he kills you, which shows a commitment to personal development that you have to respect, even under the circumstances. The educational programs continue to expand. Caesar has instituted morning exercises. Physical fitness sharpens mental acuity. Afternoon seminars on Roman history. If you're going to steal from Romans, you should understand Roman culture. And evening discussions of literature. An uneducated pirate is just a thief with a boat. During one particularly memorable literature seminar, Caesar attempts to explain the plot of the Iliad to your crew. This goes about as well as you'd expect. So this whole war, Bloodbeard summarizes, started because some guy stole another guy's wife. Helen was generally considered the most beautiful woman in the world, Caesar explains patiently. Her abduction by Paris was seen as an unforgivable insult to Greek honor. But the war lasted 10 years, Tommy asks. For one woman? Well, it became about more than just Helen, Caesar admits. National pride, territorial disputes, economic competition, personal vendettas. So it started about a woman, but became about money and politics, you interject. Exactly. Caesar beams at you like you've just solved a difficult mathematical equation. You're beginning to understand how most conflicts work. They start with simple emotional motivations, but evolve into complex economic and political struggles. Like piracy, Marcus asks. Like everything, Caesar replies. Take our current situation. You kidnapped me for money, which is simple enough. But now it's become about education, respect, personal growth, and eventually justice. The original transaction has evolved into something much more complex. You're starting to realize that Caesar sees your kidnapping as a kind of social experiment. He's not just passing time until the ransom arrives. He's studying your crew like a natural philosopher studying interesting insects. Except instead of just observing, he's actively trying to improve the insect's quality of life before pinning them to a display board. The strangest part is that it's working. Your crew is becoming more disciplined, more knowledgeable and, oddly enough, more confident. Caesar treats them like they're capable of learning complex subjects, so they start believing they're capable of learning complex subjects. Tommy, who could barely write his own name 2 weeks ago, is now taking notes during the philosophy lectures. Marcus has started asking questions about Roman law that show genuine intellectual curiosity. Even Bloodbeard seems different. Your captain, usually content to grunt commands and rely on intimidation, has begun engaging in actual conversations about leadership theory and maritime strategy. Caesar has somehow convinced a career pirate to think critically about the ethical implications of his profession. You realize, Caesar mentions during one of his rope maintenance tutorials, because even his practical lessons have become educational, that you're all much more intelligent than you pretend to be. What do you mean, you ask? I mean, you've spent so long thinking of yourselves as simple criminals that you've forgotten you're actually quite capable people, Caesar explains. Marcus has natural engineering instincts. Look at how quickly he mastered complex knotwork. Tommy has an excellent memory for detail. He's memorized half the Iliad just from hearing me recite it twice. Bloodbeard has genuine leadership qualities, even if he's been applying them to questionable ends. You think we're smart? Tommy asks hopefully. I think you're uneducated, Caesar corrects gently. There's a significant difference. Intelligence is what you're born with. Education is what you choose to do with that intelligence. You've all chosen to educate yourselves since I've been here, which suggests the intelligence was always present. This might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to your crew, which is deeply ironic considering it's coming from someone who's planning to execute you all in the near future. Caesar, Bloodbeard says slowly, when you have us killed. We might have you executed, Caesar corrects, because apparently there's a meaningful distinction. Right. When you have us executed, will you make it quick? Caesar considers this seriously. I'll tell you what, he says finally. If you continue applying yourselves to these educational opportunities, I promise your executions will be as merciful as Roman law allows. I might even see about getting you proper funeral rites. A man shouldn't face death without having achieved some measure of dignity, even if he spent his life as a maritime entrepreneur. It would be, thank you, Bloodbeard says quietly. And that's how you find yourself in the surreal position of being grateful to your hostage for promising to kill you kindly. Caesar has somehow made his planned revenge seem like a generous gesture rather than a terrifying threat. As your third week begins, you're starting to suspect that Caesar's real plan isn't just to educate your crew before executing them. You think he might be trying to turn you into the kinds of people who don't deserve execution. Not because he's gone soft on revenge, but because turning criminals into decent human beings and then having to kill them anyway would be the kind of ironic justice that Caesar seems to appreciate. It's either brilliant or completely insane. With Caesar, these things often amount to the same thing. But right now he's starting his daily reading from what he claims is his translation of Sappho's poetry, and you don't want to miss it. His Greek pronunciation has been helping with your own language studies, and besides, some of Sappho's poems are actually quite beautiful. You can contemplate the philosophical implications of your situation later. Right now, you're getting a classical education from one of the most dangerous men in the Roman world, and somehow this seems like the best possible use of your time, even if it does end with your crucifixion. You wake up on day 38 to find Caesar already awake, sitting in his usual spot but somehow looking different, more focused, more dangerous. For the past month, he's been like an eccentric professor who happened to be tied up on your ship. This morning, he looks like someone who's just remembered he has an empire to run and people to conquer. Ah, he says when he notices you're awake. Perfect timing. I believe today is going to be very interesting. Before you can ask what he means, young Tommy comes running from the lookout post with the kind of excitement that usually means either very good news or very bad news. With your crew, it's usually bad news. Ships, Tommy shouts. Roman ships. Flying official banners. Your stomach drops. Roman military ships are bad news under any circumstances, but Roman military ships arriving exactly 38 days after you kidnapped a Roman citizen are particularly bad news. You look at Caesar, who smiles with the serene confidence of a man whose plans are finally coming together. The ransom, Bloodbeard realizes. They've brought the ransom. 50 talents of silver, Caesar confirms cheerfully. Just as we agreed. Though I do hope they brought a few extra ships. You'll understand why shortly. There's something in his tone that makes your blood run cold. For the past month, Caesar has been making jokes about having you all crucified, but they were casual jokes, mentioned in passing like commentary on the weather. This morning, his jokes have a different quality. They sound less like jokes and more like promises. The Roman ships approach with the kind of precise formation that speaks of professional military training. These aren't merchant vessels or civilian transports. These are warships, crewed by people who kill other people for a living. You count at least 30 armed soldiers visible on the decks, which seems like overkill for a simple ransom exchange. Why so many soldiers for a ransom pickup? Marcus asks nervously. Oh, Caesar says with obvious delight. Those aren't for the ransom pickup, those are for afterwards. Afterwards? You repeat, though you're starting to get a very bad feeling about what afterwards might involve. Did I not mention? Caesar asks with theatrical innocence. I sent a few additional letters along with the ransom negotiations, mostly just updates on my situation, requests for certain supplies, that sort of thing. Oh, and detailed intelligence about pirate operations in this part of the Aegean, including precise coordinates for your usual haunts, descriptions of your ship and crew, and recommendations for the most effective military response to maritime entrepreneurship in these waters. The silence that follows this revelation is the kind of silence that usually precedes either violence or complete panic. Your crew processes this information with the slow horror of people who have just realized they've been playing chess against someone who was playing an entirely different game. You've been planning this the whole time, Bloodbeard says slowly. Planning is such a limited word, Caesar muses. I prefer to think of it as optimizing outcomes. You kidnapped me, which was your choice. I decided to make the best of the situation while ensuring appropriate consequences for your actions. Educational consequences, followed by legal consequences, followed by, well, you know, the crucifixion thing, Tommy whispers. The crucifixion thing, Caesar confirms with a nod. Though I want to emphasize that this isn't personal. You've all become quite likable over the past month. Under different circumstances, I think we could have been friends, but actions have consequences, and kidnapping Roman citizens has very specific consequences under Roman law. The ransom exchange proceeds with the surreal politeness that has characterized your entire interaction with Caesar. The Roman naval commander, a weathered man who clearly knows Caesar personally, boards your ship with a small escort of soldiers. "Caesar," the commander says with obvious relief, "are you unharmed?" "Completely unharmed," Caesar assures him. "In fact, I've had a delightful time. These gentlemen have been excellent hosts, very educational. I've learned quite a lot about maritime operations, and I believe they've learned quite a lot about Roman literature and philosophy." The commander looks around at your crew with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't make sense. "They educated you?" "Oh no," Caesar laughs. "I educated them. Extensively. Marcus here has become quite skilled at advanced knot work. Tommy has memorized significant portions of Homer, and Captain Bloodbeard has developed a genuine appreciation for the complexities of leadership theory. Really, it's been a very successful month for everyone involved." "Successful?" the commander repeats flatly. "Well, successful for me," Caesar clarifies. "Less successful for them, obviously, given what's about to happen. But educational success is still success. The actual ransom handover is almost anticlimactic. 50 talents of silver, exactly as negotiated, counted out with bureaucratic precision. Caesar watches the proceedings with the satisfaction of someone whose accounting has balanced perfectly. "Gentlemen," Caesar addresses your crew as the Roman soldiers prepare to cut his bonds. "It has been genuinely educational. I want you to know that despite the unfortunate ending to our relationship, I hold no personal animosity toward any of you. You're all much better people now than you were 38 days ago." "Caesar," Marcus says desperately, "you don't have to do this. We could let you go and never practice piracy again. We could become merchants or fishermen or something legitimate." "I'm sure you could," Caesar agrees kindly. "And, under different circumstances, I might consider such an arrangement. But I made you a promise on the very first day. I told you I would come back and have you all crucified. A man's word is his bond, especially a Roman man's word. I can't very well become a leader of men if I don't keep my promises." "Even promises about killing people?" Tommy asks hopefully. "Especially promises about killing people," Caesar confirms. "Those are the most important promises to keep. They establish credibility." As the Roman soldiers cut Caesar's bonds, you notice that he moves with the fluid grace of someone who could probably have escaped at any time over the past month. The ropes that you thought were restraining him were apparently more of a suggestion. He stretches like a cat, works the stiffness out of his shoulders, and suddenly looks less like a hostage and more like exactly what he is, one of the most dangerous political animals in the Roman world. "Now then," Caesar says briskly, brushing dust off his toga, "I believe we have some business to conclude. Captain, if you would be so kind as to escort my former hosts to the appropriate vessels. I think 3 ships should be sufficient for the operation I have in mind." "Who operation?" Bloodbeard asks, though you suspect you already know. "The operation where I fulfill my promise to have you all crucified," Caesar explains with the patient tone of someone clarifying an obvious point. "I've spent the past month gathering detailed intelligence about your organization, your methods, your hideouts, and your associates. The Roman Navy now has everything they need to eliminate piracy in this entire region of the Aegean. You're not just being arrested, you're being used as the foundation for a comprehensive anti-piracy campaign. You turned our kidnapping into a military intelligence operation, you realize. I turned your kidnapping into a military intelligence operation, a educational experiment, a cultural exchange program, and a demonstration of Roman justice," Caesar corrects. "Efficiency, gentlemen. Why accomplish just one goal when you can accomplish 4? The Roman soldiers are efficient and professional. No unnecessary violence, no dramatic speeches about justice, just the practical business of transferring prisoners from one ship to another. You find yourself oddly grateful for their professionalism, which is probably another thing Caesar planned. Even your arrest is educational. As you're led toward the Roman ships, Caesar falls into step beside you. "I want you to know," he says quietly, "that if circumstances were different, I would have genuinely enjoyed continuing our philosophical discussions. You've all proven to be more thoughtful than I expected." "Is that why you're having us killed?" you ask. "Because we're thoughtful?" "I'm having you killed because you kidnapped me," Caesar corrects. "But I'm having you killed mercifully because you're thoughtful. The crucifixion will be preceded by strangulation. You won't actually suffer through the crucifixion itself. That's just for the legal requirements and the public example. That's thank you, you say, because somehow Caesar has made his planned mercy killing sound like a generous gift. "Don't thank me yet," Caesar warns. "Thank me when it's over and you realize how much worse it could have been." As your ship falls behind and the Roman vessels pick up speed, you catch sight of Caesar standing at the stern of the lead ship, watching your capture with the satisfaction of someone whose plans have worked out exactly as intended. He raises one hand in what might be a wave, or might be a final salute. Either way, you wave back, because despite everything, you've come to respect the man who's about to have you executed. He kept his promises, he treated you with dignity, and he gave you the best education of your life. The fact that your life is about to end is unfortunate, but at least it's ending with style. And that, you suspect, is exactly how Caesar planned it. You spend the voyage to your execution learning one final lesson from Caesar. Roman military efficiency is absolutely terrifying when you're on the wrong side of it. The Roman ships don't waste time with dramatic chases or theatrical confrontations. They simply sail directly to every pirate hideout, safe harbor, and supply depot that you foolishly described to Caesar during his month-long intelligence-gathering operation. What you thought were casual conversations about your profession turn out to have been comprehensive debriefings conducted by someone who understood exactly what questions to ask. "I feel like we should have seen this coming," Marcus mutters as you watch the Romans systematically dismantle a pirate base that took your people 3 years to establish. "How could we have seen it coming?" Tommy asks. "He was tied up," He was reciting poetry. He was giving us philosophy lessons. He was giving us philosophy lessons about justice and consequence, you point out. We just thought they were theoretical. From the deck of the Roman ship, you watch Caesar coordinate what can only be described as the most politely conducted military operation in history. He doesn't shout orders or threaten anyone. He simply makes suggestions, in that calm, reasonable tone he used during his month on your ship. And somehow, entire pirate crews surrender without firing a shot. Gentlemen, you hear him address a group of captured pirates from another crew. I understand this is an inconvenient situation for you, but I want you to know that your cooperation is appreciated and will be noted in the official records. Roman justice distinguishes between those who resist and those who accept the consequences of their actions with dignity. Even his mass arrests are educational experiences. The most surreal part is watching Caesar reunite with pirates from your own extended network. People who've heard stories about your crew's month-long kidnapping adventure. Apparently, word had spread throughout the pirate community about the Roman who gave lectures and improved ship efficiency. Some of the other pirates actually seem excited to meet him. "You're the poetry fellow," calls out one grizzled captain as he's led aboard in chains. "My boys heard you can teach proper knot work." "I do offer some instruction in maritime skills," Caesar acknowledges graciously, "though I'm afraid our educational programs have been temporarily suspended due to the current legal proceedings." "Shame," the pirate captain says with genuine disappointment. "Could have used some of that Roman efficiency training." You realize that Caesar has somehow achieved the impossible. He's become famous among pirates for being the best hostage anyone has ever kidnapped. Even the people he's arresting seem to like him personally, which is either testament to his remarkable charisma or evidence that your entire profession attracts people with severe psychological problems. Probably both. The trial, when it comes, is conducted with the same unsettling combination of efficiency and politeness that has characterized everything Caesar does. Roman military tribunals don't waste time with elaborate legal theatre. The charges are read: piracy, kidnapping, interfering with Roman commerce. The evidence is presented, mostly Caesar's own testimony, supplemented by confessions from pirates who seem eager to tell their stories, and the verdict is delivered, guilty on all counts, obviously. Does the defendant have anything to say before sentencing? The military judge asks, because Roman law requires the question even when the outcome is predetermined. Bloodbeard stands up with as much dignity as a man in chains can manage. "Your Honour," he says, "we kidnapped Caesar because we thought he was just another rich Roman. We had no idea we were kidnapping whatever he actually is. A citizen of Rome with extensive political connections and a personal relationship with several sitting senators," the judge clarifies helpfully. "Right. That," Bloodbeard nods. "If we'd known that, we would have found someone else to kidnap. Possibly someone who doesn't give lectures about maritime law during his own kidnapping." The defendant's ignorance of the victim's importance is noted but not considered mitigating, the judge replies formally. The sentence is death by crucifixion, to be carried out tomorrow at dawn. However, Caesar interjects, and suddenly the formal courtroom atmosphere shifts slightly. "I would like to request that the court consider a modification to the sentence." The judge looks surprised. "What modification?" "The defendants have spent the past month participating in an intensive educational program," Caesar explains. "They have shown genuine intellectual growth and moral development. While I cannot recommend clemency, the law is the law. I would suggest that their cooperation and improvement warrant the mercy of strangulation prior to crucifixion." "You want them strangled first?" the judge asks, like he's making sure he heard correctly. "I want them to die quickly," Caesar clarifies. "Crucifixion serves the legal requirement for public execution, but these men don't need to suffer through the actual crucifixion process. They've earned a merciful death." And that's how Caesar manages to turn your execution into one final educational experience, a lesson in the difference between justice and cruelty. He's fulfilling his promise to have you crucified, but he's doing it in the kindest way Roman law allows. The night before your execution, Caesar visits your cell personally, not to gloat or deliver threats, but to conduct one final philosophical discussion. "I want you to understand," he says, settling himself comfortably on a stool someone has provided. that what happens tomorrow isn't personal. You violated Roman law, and Roman law requires specific consequences. But you've also proven yourselves to be thoughtful, educable people who made poor choices rather than inherently evil people who enjoy causing harm. Is there a difference, you ask, from the perspective of the people being executed? There's a significant difference, Caesar replies seriously. Evil people die as examples of what society rejects. Good people who made bad choices die as reminders that choices have consequences. Your deaths will serve a different purpose than the deaths of genuinely malicious criminals. What purpose? Marcus asks. Education, Caesar says simply. Other potential pirates will see that Roman justice distinguishes between different types of criminals. Those who show respect for law and order, even after breaking the law, receive merciful treatment. Those who resist and cause unnecessary violence do not. It's a lesson in the benefits of cooperation. You're turning our execution into a teaching tool, Tommy realizes. I'm turning everything into a teaching tool, Caesar corrects. That's what leaders do. We find ways to extract useful lessons from every situation, even unpleasant situations. Caesar, Bloodbeard says quietly, when we're dead, will you remember us? Caesar considers this seriously. I'll remember that you were better men at the end than you were at the beginning, he says finally. I'll remember that you proved that people can change when given the opportunity and motivation. I'll remember that you faced your consequences with dignity. That's good, Bloodbeard says. I'd like to be remembered as someone who got better. You will be, Caesar promises. All of you will be. The execution itself is conducted with Roman precision and, true to Caesar's word, Roman mercy. The actual crucifixion part lasts only long enough to satisfy the legal requirements. The crosses are raised, the charges are read publicly, and then the strangulation is carried out quickly and professionally. You have just enough time to look out over the crowd that has gathered to watch and realize that Caesar is standing in the front row, not with celebration but with something that might be respect. He's keeping his promise to witness your deaths personally, which somehow seems appropriate. Your last thought, as the world fades around you, is that you've learned more in the past month than in the rest of your life combined, not just about knots and dice and poetry, but about the kinds of men who shape the world and the kinds of consequences that follow from the choices ordinary people make. Caesar was right about one thing: this has been educational from beginning to end. Even the ending. Caesar stands at the harbour as the sun sets behind him, watching the ships that will carry news of the successful anti-piracy operation back to Rome. The crosses have been taken down, the pirates buried with as much dignity as Roman law allows, and the Aegean is now significantly safer for Roman commerce. Mission accomplished, in other words, justice served, lessons taught, political reputation enhanced, and 38 days of unexpected education converted into a comprehensive intelligence victory that will secure this region for years to come. Caesar has somehow managed to turn being kidnapped into a career advancement opportunity, because of course he has. He stands there for a moment, looking out at the water where your ship used to sail, and you like to think, if you could still think, that he's remembering the month when he accidentally became a professor of piracy and discovered that even criminals can be taught to be better people, given sufficient time and properly structured educational opportunities. Tomorrow, Caesar will sail back to Rome with stories about his adventure, recommendations for maritime security improvements, and a collection of original poetry inspired by his temporary captivity. He'll probably dine out on tales of teaching philosophy to pirates for the rest of his life, assuming he doesn't get assassinated in the Senate first. But tonight he stands quietly at the harbour, perhaps reflecting on the strange month when he learned that leadership isn't just about commanding armies or winning political victories. Sometimes it's about recognizing potential in unexpected places and helping people become better versions of themselves, even when those people happen to be professional criminals who kidnapped you. Sleep well, dear viewer, because Julius Caesar just demonstrated that education is the most powerful weapon in any arsenal, and somehow made it look like simple common sense. Good night.